We're a couple seconds late here, but there we go. Now we're live. Hey, all right, cool. Hey, welcome to Warthog Wednesdays. I'm Shanghai. I think a bunch of you know me from Movers Channel. This is my first time hosting a live stream, and I've got I'll never eclipse this guest probably. It's my beloved squadron commander, Mike Irish O'Connor, Colonel retired from the Air Force. Um, he was my boss when we went to the desert, and we've got some great stories in the trenches trying to get to the desert. And then I recall you on my wing for a couple missions actually in the
Yeah,
desert as
yeah,
well. Yeah,
yeah,
so I
yeah.
was looking at my logbook trying to figure out which missions those were, but absolutely. So yeah, and I'll tell you what, there's some pressure. Don't get your squadron commander killed, kids. So I think he kind of led from the number two position on that one. But also, I'll let him talk about himself here. But as I also recall, I believe you led the first A-10 mission off the patch at King Fahd, didn't you?
Yeah. In fact, John Conley and I,
Yeah.
he was on my wing that day, and we took
Yep.
off. I mean, it was just a few minutes after 5 o'clock in the morning, I believe. And I, one of the guys, 1-2 ship from, it may have been Rob Sweet. I can't remember, but they were out there in the arming area with us. And I told Conley, I said, come on, we got to beat these guys off the runway because, that'll be our only claim to fame here, right off the bat is being the first off King Fahd for the Hogs anyway, because the F-16s were already boring holes in the sky at dark 30 that day. But yeah, we were the first 2 ship of A-10s off.
Yeah, and you went way out to Western Iraq, didn't you? We'll talk about that some more, I think. But was it border radar sites way out in the west?
Yeah. We, well, in fact, we ended up going to KKMC first, and it was just a dark black hole out there because the runway lights, nothing was turned on.
No kidding.
So, I knew where it was, but nothing was on. I mean, nothing, not a light at all. And so we're talking to the guys on the ground, and Colonel Radcliffe was up there by then, I believe. And they eventually found the Saudi worker or somebody who had the keys to the generator shack or something. And they ended up getting the runway lights on. So we were able to land, refuel, and took off out towards Al Juf. And we landed at Al Juf, got gas again, and then went to the target and dropped our dumb bombs, and then used the Mavericks on the troposcatter radar site out there.
Wow.
And then from there, we ended up going back to KKMC for gas, and then back home to King Fahd. I think all told, we were almost about 12 hours in the airplane that day.
Wow, that's awesome. Hey, do you know this kid? He's not a kid anymore, apparently, but
that's about that. Hey, Colin.
Hey, there he is right there. Yeah, Colin, I was telling your dad that you and I were messaging back and forth, and you called him an old birdie, and I said, well, he's not that old. You said, well, his youngest just turned 40, so he is that old. So, of course, Colin, that makes me feel old too, man. So you owe me one. But it's good to see you on the podcast, man. Appreciate you. And I was chatting with your dad before we went on the air here, and I still have that drawing that you made for me, bud, of the Su-7 and the Mi-8. I actually look for it today. It's probably in my storage, but I'm going to take a picture of it and put it up on the site because that was a very detailed drawing for an 8-year-old young man. Very cool. So glad you're here, man. Now I'm not sure how to remove this comment, but I just stay up there forever. Oh, here we go. Hide. Boom. There we go.
Yep, there you go.
So yeah. Well, we started in the middle, obviously, as we're going to do. I told Colonel O'Connor that it's going to just be a conversation because A, I don't know what I'm doing, and B, we haven't talked since maybe about '92, I think, when I took off in an A-10 to the Azores, to Lodges, and then to Myrtle Beach, and then parked at the Boneyard. That was my PCS from Malcolmbury to Pope Air Force Base, was in an A-10 to the Boneyard. So that was quite an adventure as well. But hey, so sir, if you will, just maybe tell us, how you got interested in aviation, what your path was to the Air Force, and what you did besides what I know of in our United States Air Force before you retired after what 28 years, I think you said. So
Yeah. Well, I grew up, born and raised in Ohio, a little town called Xenia, right about 10 miles east of Dayton. And of course, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is
yeah,
right there. And at that point in time, the B-52s were over there. And of course, the Air Force Museum was there, although it's not nearly as big back then as it is now. And in fact, it wasn't even at that part of the field. It was over in a little town called Fairborn, which was,
oh really?
yeah, just on the other side of the huge airfield. But anyway, growing up around airplanes, and then my brother, I mean, I was the oldest of four boys in our family, and the next oldest, my brother Mark, he ended up getting his private pilot's license before he had his driver's license. So I went to school at Miami University down in Oxford, Ohio, and the head football coach at Xenia High School, he and Mark were fairly close friends, and he owned a Cessna, and he said, hey, as long as you put gas in it and take it out and fly it. So he'd come down to Miami, pick me up, and we'd fly back to Springfield Airport, which 10 minutes from our house, and
Cool.
so I got the bug, and from there, after graduating from college, I worked for about a year and a half at a lumber company there in Dayton, and of course Pat and I got married right after graduating from college. At least me, she was a year behind me, but and then I joined the Air Force through OTS in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. So from 1972 to 2023, this is the first time I have been back to the San Antonio area since I entered the Air Force in 1972 in OTS. So
No kidding.
yeah, I haven't been down to Lackland yet, but I'll make it down there.
I was OTS class 8702 was my class at OTS, and I don't know about you, but I had a few tears in my eyes as I put that place in my rearview mirror. And I've not been back there either, but I and I did not know. This is an interesting thing for the viewers as well. Is that Mike and I were it's tough to call him Mike. The boss and I were very close. For a squadron commander and a brand new captain in a squadron. He gave me a very challenging additional duty as chief of combat plans, and that became a very key thing as he and I worked some really long hours late into the night. I remember us going into the vault, and I remember it was me going into the vault when it was dark outside and coming out when it was dark outside at night, just to trying to figure out how we get to the desert maybe, and we'll talk more about that. But it's interesting that for as close as I felt to you, sir, as a squadron commander, I don't know much about you. So, and I would have sworn you were an academy guy.
No,
And,
no,
yeah,
no. Born and raised in OTS, and then
yeah.
from there, March of 73, went to pilot training in Enid, Oklahoma, and then in April of 74, graduated and went to George Air Force Base in Victorville, California, and flew the F-4s.
Oh,
and
wow.
then flew the F-4. My first tour was operational in Thailand at Udorn, Royal Thai Air Force Base, and got involved in the Mayaguez incident while I was there for that year. And also we flew cover for the 7 helicopter landing zones for the evacuation of Saigon when the Viet Cong were coming down and, were going to invade Saigon. So we were flying cover for those. And
let me ask you a question about that. So when you graduated from Vance and then went to George and then you were going over to Thailand, what was the Vietnam conflict still brewing at that time? And did you think you're going to fly, daily combat missions? Because Udorn, of course, is a big
technically it ended in 73 when they brought all the POWs out of Vietnam, out of Saigon, or out of Hanoi.
Yeah.
And then, but the Vietnam medal went through like May of 75. So, we were still part of the Vietnam era, even though the only combat support we actually got involved in was the Mayaguez incident and the flying for the helicopter landing zones in Saigon. But after that, we probably, I'd say, half of our guys from the squadrons there at Udorn, Karat in Thailand, some guys out of the Philippines, and then a bunch of guys that came from Korea went to Moody in December of 75. And we basically opened up an F4 tactical fighter wing at Moody. It had been an T-38, T-37 ATC base, but we took it over, and I was spent 3 years there and then left there, went to fighter weapons school while I was at Moody. And then from there went over to Zaragoza Air Base in Spain, and was part of the weapons detachment over there. And we basically ran a air-to-ground gunnery range over there. And I was the OIC of Bardenas Realis gunnery range there. And in fact, we went there in the 511.
We sure did.
Yeah. But anyway,
that was a great deployment. I remember that very fondly.
Was. So let's see. I flew the F4s there, even though we didn't have any airplanes at Zaragoza. All the F4 units in Germany and on the continent came down for their, gunnery stuff because of the range primarily. And then from there, I left and went back to Nellis as an instructor in the F4 FWIC. And then we transitioned it over to the Guard, because that was about the same time that the F-16s were coming on board, and they were ramping up the F-16 division of the Fighter Weapons School, and we were, closing down the F-4 division of the Weapons School. And then after that, I went to Armed Forces Staff College in Norfolk, Virginia for a 6-month PCS, and then from there, NATO staff job, and from there I went Alconbury, and pretty much the rest is history after Desert Storm. And then went to the Army War College, and from there went to Kunsan, as I told you earlier, support group commander, then moved up to Osan as the ops group commander, got checked out in the F-16. And then my last 2 assignments in the Air Force before I retired were 13th Air Force Vice Commander at Anderson Air Force Base, Guam. And then I went to U.S. Pacific Command as the J-30O, the deputy's deputy, basically, for the J-3 at SINCPAC.
Yeah, man.
And then I retired, and then I became a government contractor, and basically doing same job I did there on active duty in 97 at USACOM at that time, was joint training and exercises.
Yeah, and now you're fully retired, right? You're a house
now
husband.
I'm fully retired. Yeah, I did the government contractor stuff for about 12 years, and then I decided it was time to pack it in.
So you're a house husband to your long-suffering wife, Pat O'Connor, and you granted her wish to move to a warmer clime, right?
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I was tired of the hurricane threats and all that stuff, and so between the two of us, this is a great place to be. And I've got a brother that lives down here in San Antonio. He's retired from the Air Force, and of course, Colin's down here now. And I've got cousins that are down here. In fact, one of my close cousins, he's about 3-4 years older than I am. We grew up in the same hometown back in Ohio, and his son was our realtor when we came down here to house hunt. So he's the one that found us this house. And so here we are.
Which I know Pat's trying to fill up that guest room, because she's invited me a couple of times, and Colin as well. And my son's down in Houston, so
hey, listen, Todd, whenever you get a chance and you want to come down this way, just send me a text or give us a call and let us know, because we've got plenty of spare bedrooms.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take you up on that for sure, sir. And Pat is, Pat is so gracious to invite me. But next time I headed down to Houston to see my son, I'll divert through San Antonio on the way there, way back. So, for sure. But what a great career, sir, and thank you for your service.
Well, you too, bud. You too.
Well, but boy, again, I'm learning more about you. I mean, uh, I knew you were a shit hot squadron commander, and I was just a brand new guy to the A-10 coming out of the OA-10, obviously, and I don't know if you recall I think it was maybe my second weekend there. I might have still been in the queue actually. I think I was still in the queues. Angela and I when it was the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Britain Fighter Pilots
Oh yeah,
Association there in
yeah,
Alphabet.
yeah.
Yeah, and I remember being at the bar joke about John Condon, and God rest his soul.
Yeah.
What a great fighter pilot that man was. But great person all around. But I remember being at the bar, and up strolls Laddie Lucas, Air Vice Marshal Laddie Lucas, a knight, one of the knight, the Order of British Empire, knight, Air Vice Marshal Laddie Lucas, and he says, "What are you drinking, Captain?" I said, "Conley Coke, sir." He said, "First of all, don't call me sir. I'm a fighter pilot just like you." He says, "What's that? I never heard of that drink." I said, "Well, it's named after John Connor, right?" It was spiced rum, Captain Morgan's, and Diet Coke. He says, "That's not a manly drink." He said, "Barkeep, a G&T for the captain. Jimmy's if you got it." And there I am, learning to drink gin and tonic with Laddie Lucas at a bar at an air base in England. How about that? It was awesome. So that was my first memories of Alconbury, for sure. What models of the F4 were you flying?
Oh, let's see. I flew at George. I flew the F4C, the F4D, and at Udorn, I flew the F4D and hard wing E's, and those are without the slats. And then when we transitioned to Moody, once we got our airplanes, which was about 6 months, but that's a different story. We flew the slatted E's, and I got to like that airplane really, really well. I flew the F4 for almost 12 years in my career, and of course went to weapons school through the school as a student, and then came back as an instructor for 3 years. And the F4. I mean, even though I went to combat for a few hours in the F4, the A-10 was probably still the most fun airplane that I've ever had to fly. Just point and shoot ordnance, and you can't ask for anything better than that.
Well, I was gonna save that question for the end of the interview, but yeah, I thought it might come out that what you enjoyed best. I thought it might be the A-10. I mean, they say your first jet's your first love and is your favorite, but I think maybe the one you take to combat to get you home maybe is that airplane. Of course, I stayed in the A-10, but well, let's jump forward to that a little bit, because I think that's what most people want to hear about, and where most of our common ground is. So it was my first, just mentioned my first, memory of Alconbury was that Battle of Britain deal. That was so awesome. Also met Air Vice Marshal Johnny Johnson there. And I don't know if you're probably aware of this, because when we came back, remember when we got back from the war, I got a call from the Wing Commander's secretary, and she said, "The Knights are requesting your president at lunch at the Officers Club next Wednesday," or whatever. I said, "Oh man, we're just back from the desert. I don't even know if my blue suit fits anymore." She said, "Oh, they said something. You'd say something like that, and they said if you dress in anything but a flight suit, they're going to strip you naked, make you run the length of the flight line." So
that's good.
So I went. So I showed up my green bag and had lunch. Of course, they were dressed, like the dapper gentlemen that they were, and Air Vice Marshal Johnson was not in very good health at that time, and they told me they're writing their last book. They're titled "Great Air Battles from the Somme, World War I to Desert Storm," and they wanted to put a little blurb in there about me and shooting down a helicopter. I thought I was super honored, of course, and then I ended up getting a copy of that book, an advanced copy signed by both of those guys. So that was my first memory of Alconbury. But backwards a little bit was so when I left Suwon. Of course, went to pilot training at InJet. I wanted F-16 because everybody wanted F-16 as a sexy recruiting poster airplane. But I was super excited to get an A-10. In fact, I did see when I was looking through my pictures earlier. I saw a picture of me going kind of like this up on the stage, assignment night, and I got an A-10. And But then a couple of weeks later, the assignment folks came back and they said, well, we need a couple of A10 guys throughout all the pilot training bases to volunteer for the OA10, a new thing replacing the OV10s at DM. And so I thought, well, my quickest avenue to an F-16 is go be a forward air controller, not considered one of the better deals for a fighter pilot, but if you do okay, you're going to get your first choice after that. And so I thought that's my quickest route to an F-16. Go fly the OA-10, and so I did. Went to the A-10 RTU. There's my trophy as the
Yep.
top gun of the class 88 HBD at the RTU, and then I showed up at the Forward Air Control Squadron, 23rd Tactical Air Support Squadron, the Misty Fax, and there was a little spin up program, but the only RTU we had was the full A10 RTU, and so did that, and then they said we're converting the OV10s at Suwon to OA10s, and we need a couple of guys to volunteer to do that. So I had to be 1 year on station at DM, and so literally my 366th day, out I went to Suwon and spent a year there. And there we did, as being at Osan and down at the Rock, we did a lot of great flying in Korea. Got more hours. It was a real tip of the spear stuff. And there you are, as a young guy up there, single ship, single seat, up along P518, that muck,
Yeah.
And back then trying to control F5s, F5E, and those guys zipping around trying to, penetrate North Korean airspace by mistake. But so it was a pretty responsible mission for a young guy, and upgraded to force ship there. And then my boss there was a bachelor, an F-16 guy, doing his bad deal 1 year assignment at Suwon as a OA-10 commander. Great guy. And I don't know, maybe a month or so before my PCS date, he calls me and says, well, Shanghai, what do you want to do next? And he said, you don't have to answer. I got you an F-16 slot to Luke. And I said, well, boss, I may want to stay in the A10. He said, no, you don't want to stay in the A10. I know it'd be fun. I said, I want to go to England. He said, well, it'd be fun to fly over Germany with your hair on fire at 100 feet or whatever. But yeah, the future of the Air Force is the F-16, my friend. You go over to the A10, you're going to ruin your career. Well, I persisted and was super excited to get to Alconbury. And then the Battle of Britain thing was great. And then Mr. Gorbachev, tear that wall down.
Yeah.
And as you'll recall, I don't know if you felt the same way. We didn't have a mission all of a sudden. We weren't going to get many flying hours. And I'm hearing the ghosts, the echoes of my squadron commander at Suwon's, you'll ruin your career. The future that is the F-16. And I thought, man, I've really messed this thing up. And then Saddam invaded Kuwait. And I don't know about you, but I got pretty demoralized at that time. I remember the long face around there because all the stateside boys in the A-10s are going to the desert, and there's probably going to be a shooting war. And here we are at Alconbury, drawing down a squadron that doesn't have any mission anymore. I made one trip to Leipheim. That was it. I was on your wing. If you remember this, we did the thing where the wives were in the tankers, right?
Yep.
We flew over to Leipheim, and I was on your wing. I was either number 2 or maybe 4. I don't remember. I think I might have been your number 2. When we did the Leipheim was having like their, I don't know, 500th year anniversary, inaugural, or their annual celebration of the founding of their city, and we did a flyby down Main Street. I think you might have gotten a little bit of hot water for that one, didn't you? Tell me about that story. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
We flew pretty low down Main Street, as I recall.
Yeah. I think we took a few hits on that one, but
yeah, it was our last. It was our last deployment to Leipheim. My first and only deployment to Leipheim, and which, by the way, for the viewers, that was our forward operating location. As I recall, the mission of A-10s at Alconbury was within about 12 hours or so of a balloon going up. We would, launch our jets over to Leipheim, where we had, beans, bullets, and beds, and bombs, and maintainers, and that was our mission, is just to get our jets across the channel over to Germany, southern Germany, Bavaria, and we'd stage out of there and stop the communist hordes from coming through the Fulda Gap. But that plays into what we're going to talk about here in a minute too. Is that so? that was our mission. So we had, people over there. We had all of our spare parts over there. We had munitions over there. Again, I had a locker with my name on it and bed, and that's what we did. So when Germany reunified and the collapse of the Soviet Union, obviously that mission went away, and uh, and so it was pretty dark days around there, especially for a brand new captain, not being a careerist really, but I was really looking forward to the mission of the A-10 in England and Germany, and but also, as I said, thinking, yeah, maybe I have messed up this career because I'm in an airframe that's going away with a base that's going away at a squadron with no mission, and as chief of plans, though, it was a big job because we had to catalog all those plans and get them to the right place for destruction and all those things. But then the stateside boys are going to the desert. So talk us through a little bit, boss, about what we did then.
Well, that was one heck of a story. When those guys started deploying from Alexandria, Louisiana, and Myrtle Beach back in August of 90, and we had just come back from a small deployment over at the FOL at Alhorn. And we brought our airplanes back, and we took some of them up to, oh gosh, it was one of the guard units from I think Pennsylvania was deployed over there just north of us from Alconbury, east of the Wash area, at one of those old bases, and we were transitioning airplanes, and I remember Art Hedlund, who was the DO there at Alconbury of the wing. He called me and Yankee Bennett in and said, "Hey, listen, we just got word." And of course, nobody was even talking war at this time. They were talking about contingency plans and having airplanes over there. And they were saying, there's probably going to be a squadron of A-10s from Europe. Of course, 4 at Bentwaters, 2 at Alconbury. Who's probably going to go? We all figured Bentwaters.
Right.
Well, Yankee and I got Bob Ham together, our maintenance officer.
Yeah.
And said, "Listen, you guys have done one hell of a job putting together, the deployment to Alhorn, coming back, swapping jets to the Guard, getting some of the airplanes from the 509th, swapping those out. And we need to put together a plan of, almost like an OER report of what we did, for almost that 6-week time frame, and just keep it on the shelf so that in case General Anderson, who at the time was 3rd Air Force Commander, Marcus Anderson, in case he's got to make a decision, of course, it didn't hurt that he flew with our squadron as well.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so we did. Bob and his people put together, everything that they did. We highlighted everything that, we had done. Of course, it didn't hurt either that the 511th, right after I got there, got awarded the, best fighter squadron in Europe. And so we got that award, and Sink USAFE was over there to present that. And fortunately, I was, just taking over the squadron, and, we got that award. So, all the things were lining up in case somebody had to get picked. And then, of course, here it was. General Anderson says, "Well, if it's going to be somebody, it's going to be you guys, because of everything that this squadron has done." And I'm sure as I'm sitting here, Todd, to this day, a lot of it was exactly, that paper that we had our maintenance guys put together, because it was just a thing of beauty of everything that they did. and
Well, you
Art
remember,
Hedlund, God rest his soul, too. He really said, "Yeah, you guys, if somebody's going, it's going to be you guys." And and then those late nights that you were talking about, we working there, putting the game plan together of getting from Alconbury to Saudi Arabia. Once the word came down that we were going to go,
yeah,
and putting that briefing together. And then when General Anderson came over to the squadron, and we gave him and the wing commander and the DO the briefing, and to include all the tankers and everything. And
yeah.
uh,
You remember when the Cajuns got picked to go though? I mean, that was kind of in that planning cycle where we were hearing those rumors, as I recall, that there was going to be maybe in the need for another A-10 squadron. And we thought, well, it's going to have to come from England, as you were just remarking. And then the Cajuns, the New Orleans reserve guys, are heading over the desert. We're thinking, doggone it. And then and more rumors again. And I remember you tasking me, and I don't remember who the chief of training was at that time. Uh, I should recall, but I may recall here in a moment, but I'm not thinking about it. But I remember you tasking us to get with the guys that were over in the desert, buddies that we knew, get on the secure lines and figure out what they're doing as far as tactics, what kind of training are they doing, what are they thinking, and then we put together a little training program for the few flying hours that we were getting
yeah,
in our
yeah,
squadron to do that. I remember flying with General Anderson at least once or twice that would brief something simple, and then it would be, hey, Colonel O'Connor's give a briefing in the main briefing room, contingency plans for Operation Desert Shield. Would you like to sit in, General? Oh yes, and march him down to a little dog and pony show, and I remember that a couple of times, and I know he appreciated that, but then I remember also stepping to fly one day about this time of year, actually 1990. Is shortly before Thanksgiving, as I recall, and you calling me into your office, and I mean literally I was in life support, and you got me standing at attention at your desk, and General's on the speakerphone, and I'm thinking, what, I'm in trouble, and and literally, and then you both start laughing, and he says, because he said something like, "Gee, how'd you think you're pulling the wool over the old man's eyes with that bullshit dog and pony show?" And I think I'm in trouble, right? And then you guys start laughing. He says, "So you want to go to the desert, do you? Pack your bags." Expletive deleted. And then we were, "Ah."
yeah.
And
Well,
that really began. I mean, I remember having Angela and I had dinner on Thanksgiving with the Cavotes and um, uh, and Bino and his wife. So at Cavote's house, and I remember I came from the vault and was late for almost late for dinner, and that was my Thanksgiving, because we were just, I remember we were trying to figure out, how do we get A-10s from England to the desert. We didn't have the risk kits and the tanker support and the airlift and all that stuff. And remember, France wasn't letting us overfly with live bombs. I remember talking to the embassy, you and I, for hours on end, it seems like, trying to get authorization to do that, and we ended up ROing at Sigonella. In fact, I've got right here. This is a kind of I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of a timeline. It's written on that paper that came in that big box that was perforated on both sides.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's kind of a day by day unclassified timeline of Desert Shield and Desert Storm log, and it's talking about 27 December 90, after many ups and downs in deployment preparation, the departure of the Advon team in early December, thankful Christmas, um, blah, blah, blah. So started. So here we are, starting at 0800 local, 18 primary jets plus spares lift off without a hitch after tearful goodbyes. There's there's my picture,
yep,
standing just before walking out the jets, about, I don't know, it seems like we think we launched at 4:15, so that would have been about 3:30 in the morning. Got that flat top haircut going. Angela's been crying, and there we are, headed off to war. Really, we at that point in time, obviously by just after Christmas, I think we knew that the peace talks had pretty much broken down, and it'd been, the stateside boys been over there since August, and so I think we pretty much knew that we were going over for Shootmore.
Well,
And
funny you should mention that, because we were originally supposed to go over there about the middle of January, second to third week in January,
okay,
because we were going to be, at that point in time, nobody knew what was going on, and they figured, okay, the guys from Alexandria and Myrtle Beach have been over there for almost 6 months.
yeah,
We're going to have to start rotating units in and out. And so we weren't supposed to be over there until around the second or third week in January. And I'll never forget, I'm coming up to the club on a Friday night, and this was about the second week in December of 90. And I'd no sooner put my hat in the cloakroom and getting ready to put my brick down, and Art Headland grabs me and he said, "Come here." And then here comes Jim Evans, the wing commander.
yeah, great man.
And, we're all standing there in the cloakroom, and I'm thinking, okay, you guys are ganging up on me. What's going on? And they said, "Well, you thought you were going to go in January." And I thought, oh, don't tell me they've canceled us, after all this work.
Yeah.
They said, "You're going. The Advon's leaving on the 19th of December, and you guys are leaving the day after, 2 days after Christmas." I thought, holy crap, because all the guys who had transferred from Bentwaters to Alconbury 1 year on station were supposed to have had a free trip back to the States. And I think Eric Awful and
Yeah.
like 2 or 3 of the flight commanders and a bunch of guys were going to be doing that. So I thought,
Yeah, I remember that because I was in B flight and Viking was my flight commander. I was his assistant flight commander when we came back, or actually think right before we deployed. I think I deployed as assistant B flight commander. But yeah, I remember Viking talking about that. And
yeah,
I
I mean, we
remember
had
that getting
to
moved up.
basically tell everybody, hey, sorry guys, but the caca's hitting the fan now, and we're going to have to move the timeline up by about a month. And all those plans that you guys had to go back to the States and, leave and all that, I'm sorry, but, the mission is getting moved up and moved up quickly. And of
Yeah, I
course,
think that was a tough one on the wives, but I don't think any of the guys.
that was the biggest pain, because those guys, to a man, not one of them complained at all.
Yeah.
But they had the heavy lifting job of going back and telling the wives, saying, hey, not only are we not going back to the States for vacation, over Christmas, but we're heading out of Alconbury and heading to the desert early than what was planned. And so,
yeah, we got to
that was that story too.
Yeah, we got to talk for a second about Pat O'Connor as well, because that was a time when fighter squadron is an interesting thing, and those were I've heard some movers refer to them as the golden era. I think those, and they may have been some of the best days to be a fighter pilot, and especially in England, and just think about that leadership that we just talked about. You and Yankee Bennett, God rest his soul, Art Headland, God rest his soul, Jim Evans. I mean, we had a hell of a awesome leadership group there, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you, it was fantastic. And not to belabor this, because I know we're getting short on time, but I'll never forget when Sandy Sharp, who was the 354th TAC Fighter Wing Provisional Commander, he was the wing commander from Myrtle Beach, and we were going to be part of his unit down there. He kept telling me, whenever we'd have phone conversations, now this is how many airplanes and how many people you're supposed to be bringing down here. And I said, okay. Well, little did he know that, rather than bringing what he told me to bring, we ended up bringing maybe a dozen more pilots. And long story short, when the war kicked off, and they had to provide people to go up to KKMC, to go out to, well, it wasn't Al Juf at that time, but later on, go down to Riyadh, to the hole in the wall. And so all these bodies now that they didn't have down there, Sandy Sharp came up to me and said, "Boy, I'm sure glad that you brought all those people that I told you not to bring."
Yeah, well, and you brought the Dar Kemps and the Tommy
Oh
Abbotts, and
yeah, I mean, we had more weapons school guys in the squadron that you'd have in a normal wing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a little bit of heartache, as I recall, a little bit of about what are we bringing those guys for? Because we had our group of guys, right? Like, oh, we got these infiltrators coming, but yeah, those guys proved really valuable to us, and also jumping ahead a little bit too, but um, were we the only squadron that didn't lose an airplane?
Yeah, we were the only one.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, we had a couple shot up a little bit, but we didn't have any of the really horrible battle damage, and we flew a shit ton of missions and did some really good work. The vultures were awesome, man. That was I tell you, talk about snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat. Going from that feeling of, man, maybe I've messed up my career, to I'm going to combat with an awesome squadron. I mean, obviously there's some trepidation when you're gonna, you're going to the desert, and it's probably going to be a war, and that picture kind of shows the faces of the young kids, 26 years young, and and but there was no doubt that we were ready. I think, and it was a. I remember when we arrived at FOD, and the thing was like a city. I mean, it was amazing, and we got our squadron ops and maintenance. We had that one guy, we called him the Scrounge. I don't remember his name, but he's finding all this stuff for us, and yeah, and Master Sergeant or something, and yeah, and it was
he could wheel and deal with anybody there on FOD and get us stuff.
Yeah, we just have stuff right and left. Yeah. And I remember when you left off at King FOD for that first sortie combat. I was in our ops building, because I had just received the ATO, earlier, and the night before, so I didn't have crew rest to fly. I was set alert the next morning, but I remember you guys taking off, and me and the couple enlisted guys, we had a couple minutes of silence there, said a little prayer, because that was a real deal, man. And then watching you guys come back, counting those airplanes and hearing the check-ins, and shit hot back.
I'll never forget when Connolly and I walked back into the squadron after that long mission. Our ops admin sergeant, I can't remember her name, but she was just the sweetest person. I'll never forget her. Her eyes got about that big when she saw us walk in the door, and she came running over and gave us a big hug, saying, "We didn't think you were coming back. It was so long." And I said, "No, that was just the mission. It was that long."
I was standing there off to the left, and I and the couple of guys that I worked closely with on the ATO stuff, we were watching we had that satellite feed television. We're watching. I remember having the ATO in my hand and seeing two F-117s. This AT&T Central Switching Station in Baghdad. Mark 84 LGBs. Going down the air shaft on that thing, and I remember Bernard Shaw was on the roof of the Al Rashid Hotel. Down, the skies over Baghdad are illuminated tonight. Talking to Wolf Blitzer back in CNN Center, and I remember saying to the guys, "He's going off the air in about 2 minutes or whatever." And how do you know that? I said, "Just trust me." And I was off by about 30 seconds or so I think 33 seconds on the trying to figure out the delay on the thing, but because oh no. And then so it goes dark, and back to Wolf Blitzer's. Well, I hope Bernie's okay. Oh, he's fine, but AT&T's not doing any good in Baghdad anymore. And it was that precise and that awesome. And but it's interesting too that I was talking to your buddy Scott Atwood the other night on the telephone. Yeah, he was your crew chief, right, on the Fighting Irish plane.
Well, he and Greg McPhail were my two crew chiefs. Yeah, those are my two best buds these days.
Yeah, he was telling me he was like 22 years old or something, and there he is, crew chief of the squadron commander's plane. And the thing I wanted to remark on is that just as as I felt like for any captain of the squadron, I worked really close with you, and really appreciate your mentorship, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the air with me here, but out of I had some great leadership in my time in the Air Force, but none greater than you, sir. I mean, it's just the leadership that you showed, the calm confidence that you displayed, um, and in the in pure chaos a lot of times, trying to get us there, and then once we were there, getting us bedded down and getting us a few sorties up to speed and sending us out the door to war. Um, was amazing. So, in as much as I really didn't know a whole lot about you beyond that, the pace of combat was so intense and the mission so long, and our need for crew rest and just really a sleep eat and fly cycle was such that we didn't hear a lot of the stories of missions that were going on before us. I talked to Scott the other night for quite some time. He reached out to me on Facebook, and then we ended up talking on the phone for a couple hours, and and um, and aren't we proud of him and his flying career?
Oh
He's
yeah, I tell you what,
super
that
super.
kid is just he's made me proud.
Yeah, yeah. I was telling him that that's exactly what I said to him as well. But he was telling me about. I guess you had to shut down an engine on a combat mission. Is that right?
No, almost. I mean, when we landed that day, it was me and was it me and Pepsi? I
He didn't
can't
tell
remember.
me who the wingman was. He just told me that he just remembers how just worried he was that you were flying in your airplane and you're coming back, and he's just going through his mind, did I check everything? Is it my fault? And it really gave me I'm gonna have him on maybe next week. Actually, I told him that after you I wanted to have him on and get that kind of a maintenance side of the story as well, but because that was remarkable also. But so what happened there? Just
No,
to
I'm trying to remember now. It may have been one of the missions that me and Mike Meyer flew. When we had been going up through the tri-border area and coming in, making the big swing up to the left and then making a right-hand turn towards Kuwait City, just
right.
beating them down. And then all of a sudden the frag comes out and it says, you're going up the Gulf. You're going to go up around Bubiyan Island and hang a left up there, way north of Kuwait City, and
Yeah.
come in and hit the Tawakana division of the
Right.
Republican Guard that's
Right.
still like 95% combat ready because nobody's
Yeah.
touched them yet. And
Right.
we thought, what in the hell are we doing with A-10s up here?
Yeah.
And that was the day that I thought me and Mike Meyer were just going to, I mean, we had SA-6s launched at us, you name it, heavy AAA. I mean, I thought I was blown out of the sky. This big burst goes off right at eye level, and we're probably about 18,000 at that point coming inbound. And no, actually, we were lower than that because we were heavy. But I don't know what size AAA it was, but it was the brightest orange fireball that I'd ever seen. And all I could do was just look in the cockpit to make sure that there weren't any lights on, and there weren't. And man, oh man, that was one. And we did that twice.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
remember. Though that tasking, and it was kind of another. This was almost the theme of the A10s. We're going where to do what? Because
yeah, yeah.
yeah. I remember Viking Eric Offel. He did a really cool drawing later about the A10 and all his missions like Warp Weasel and all this stuff and all this different stuff hanging off the airplane.
I've
It was
got a
cool.
copy of that too.
Yeah, yeah, he's a talented artist and a good dude, man. That yeah, I remember Bear Meyer talking a little bit about that mission, but it just kind of comes back to my point that that there wasn't a lot of time for that crosstalk, was there? I mean, we'd go on our long missions, we'd do our long debriefs and intel debriefs, and go get some chow and get some sleep and do it again. And of course,
Yeah,
you had the
yeah.
burden of command during all that time as well. I don't even know how you possibly did it, sir. Like just I know you had, because this was another thing too that I think people be interested in is I'm not sure when it changed, and I think it might have changed back, but but you owned maintenance, right? I mean, maintenance was not a separate squadron with a separate commander. You commanded ops and maintenance. Is that correct?
Well, technically, I mean, when they went over there with us, they basically belong to me, but technically they still belong to the DCM back at Alconbury and Jack Schaefer's wife, Ginger, because she
That's
was a
right.
big
That's right.
maintainer. And,
Yeah.
but while we were in the desert, Bob and Sue Pfister basically worked for us, and Craig Corbett, the chief. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, we had a great group of maintainers, and we couldn't have done anything that we did over there without those guys. I mean, to this day, I still think that they were part of the reason why we got the mission in the first place.
Yeah.
Over and above Bentwaters and the 509th is because our maintenance guys were the best. I mean, I to this day, I think they were.
I think so too. I mean, because as you alluded to before, from a command perspective, maybe from General Anderson's perspective, putting together a super squadron from those 4 squadrons was it 4 at Bentwaters? Yeah, 4 at Bentwaters. Taking all the weapons officers and all the IPs and putting those guys together. I mean, that maybe made some sense from a standpoint of, put your best team together in terms of the, what it looked like on paper, the flyers would be to survive those challenges. But yeah, no, I think it was, again, the total package of the 511th, obviously was, I mean, General Anderson, I remember him saying there was no question, in his mind, if he got to choose a squadron to go, it was going to be the 511th. And I remember said, those are my boys. Go do me proud, guys. And,
Yeah.
it was
Well,
cool.
yeah, he was a great guy. I met him again. He came to Guam. Of course, this is after he retired, and he was a, super contractor at the time. And he came over for something, and I went to the airport and met him and greeted him, and we had a great visit together while he was in town. But the other thing too is when we got back, I'll never forget Art Headland grabbed me, and we were talking about the whole time down there in the desert and all that stuff. But he said, the biggest thing that just surprised the hell out of him was that when I decided, who all I wanted to take with me, and he said, "What made you want to take Jack Schaefer?" Here was the previous squadron commander, and he said, I don't know whether I would have done that, because it would have been like, 2 squadron commanders trying to, but I told him, I said, the reason I did that is that I'd been around long enough, and I knew what was going to happen. They were going to, once things kicked off, Jack was going to get pulled up to the wing level, and he was going to become an ADO, which is exactly what happened. And then he flew with us as an attached guy, from the wing. And he was an ADO to whoever the DO was from the 354th. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but yeah. And everything worked out. I mean,
it did. It really did. And but I can kind of understand, you being posed that question, because Fox Mike was a strong personality, no doubt about that.
Yeah. But I mean, I'll tell you, Jack and I had a lot of conversations, and it was nice to have somebody that you could sound things off of and so forth. But, probably the worst mistake that I can admit that we did while we were down there, and it didn't take Yankee and I long enough to figure out that we needed to do something, was if you remember, I think it was probably the first week we were trip turning. I mean, the guys that were on the first go were flying 3 sorties.
Yeah, I did that
and
twice.
I'll never forget, after that first day, I don't think I flew for another couple of days. And I can remember standing there when guys are walking in after that 3rd sortie. And I mean, you're looking at them, but there's nobody home. And I grabbed Yankee afterwards, and I said, this isn't going to hack it. We're not going to trip turn anymore. 2 sorties, because push comes to shove, they're just going to get longer anyway when we start bringing all the air refueling missions in and so forth. So, two's going to be the maximum. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
We changed it to two, and, worked out
Yeah,
real well.
I remember talking to Yankee after my first um, trip turn, and it was like I was exactly what you described. I remember, as a flight lead, I really only thought of this in writing my book, thinking about Sparky, because the other thing I'll mention that we did, that I don't know if all the squadrons did this. I'm going to guess maybe not, but remember how we combat paired everybody up,
Yep.
and we did that for the little bit of spin up training we did back in England, and
Yep.
then so I flew 40 missions, and 36 of those Sparky was my number two.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think you were maybe twice, and so yeah, but then that worked out great. Just really super. And Sparky was an awesome number two guy, and so, but I really only in writing the book I've thought about what it must have been like for him, because as you know, as a flight lead, you're so busy that you don't have as much time to think about what you're doing, and the sort of gravity of it, and I'll just admit and be scared, scared in a healthy way, but no kidding scared. So I said I flew 40 missions, and I'm pretty sure that 40 times, somewhere between life support and stepping out to the jets, I would go find some place to dry heave. My guts were just that, knotted up about just doing it right, not getting killed, not getting Sparky killed, really the other way around, but just, not screwing up, not, and being effective, getting this thing over as quick as we can. But I remember flying 3 times, and where we'd launch, and you'd go up into the, kill box areas, and you'd, have time for 30 minutes of loiter time up there, whatever, trying to pick and choose the targets. Where my forward air controller experience came in handy. I actually carried binoculars in the cockpit. I'd be looking down in those revetments, what are the dead tanks and what are the good tanks, and trying to be effective with the weapons. And then you'd come back and we'd hot pit refuel, hot pit rearm, get another intel brief, back you go again. And I just remember coming out of the target area after that third mission, and you just have this big emotional and physical drain on you.
Yeah.
Because you finally have that chance to sort of reflect upon what you've just done all day long. And remember, it's like 13, 14 hours in the cockpit. They literally almost had to help you out of the thing because you've been strapped in that whole time.
Yeah.
And so I remember we went to that system where we'd fly like twice one day, maybe have a day of crew rest, and then fly once or twice the next day. And that made a lot more sense. I think made us a lot more effective.
Yeah, we quickly decided that we needed to change things up real quick. Otherwise, we were going to be killing people. Not literally, but they weren't going to be able to even walk out to the airplane. And but
yeah, it was.
Yeah. Would you remember? Not to go back to before we went over on some of the pre things we were talking about doing. Remember the thing about Condon and the guys at the Wing Weapons were putting together a program to get our airplanes painted gray?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, because that's a good point, because I think we were the only green hogs in the desert, weren't we? Or were the Cajuns green? Or they painted theirs
most
gray.
Everybody else was green, but now look at the A-10s. They're all gray. So what
That's
we
right.
wanted to do, because it was those green airplanes really stood out in the air against that blue sky background. And they also stood out on the ground too. Of course, we didn't know, if Saddam had anything was flying. Of course, after the first day, nothing was flying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
they
a good
were either
point.
shot down or they went someplace else.
I do remember that. I remember, did they test one airplane? Didn't they test one airplane, painting it, and they just kind of slapped some paint on it? It was kind of a pinkish color or something. I don't remember.
Yeah,
it seems like I remember something like that.
They did something like that, but the guys down in the desert said, it sounds like a good idea, but the problem is you'd be the only guys down here with that, and even though it makes a lot of sense, we wouldn't want to have just one squadron out of 6 down here with gray airplanes. So
yeah, boy, I remember my first mission. Sparky and I were sitting alert Dark 30, and it's the first time the Scud we had the sirens had gone off for Scud warning, and so the place went dark. We launched for survival. I forgot to put my flaps down. There was first of all my nose wheel steering wasn't working. So but we're launching for survival. So I'm differential braking and throttling to get the thing down to the arming area. Sparky's like 30 revetments away. It's dark as crap. We'd never really flown there dark before, and so out we go. And there's nobody in the arming area. They're in a bunker, right? So I turn on my landing light and kind of get the thing doing the elephant the get the landing light to go across the entrance to this revetment these guys are, or this bunker these guys are in, and they come out in full mop gear, probably set a world record for arming two A-10s, and I'm look at the end of there's nobody in the controls are. I look at the runway, I don't see any landing lights that say, Sparky, take 20 seconds, we're rolling. Boom, down we go. Never flown a 55,000-pound jet before, fully combat loaded, and it's just. And I don't remember the length of those runways, but they were hella long, and with the
Yeah, they
density
were
altitudes of the desert.
12, 13,000 foot runways because they were made for
Yeah.
heavies, and they were going to be, big airliners because that was going to be the King's Airport that they were building.
Yeah, by the way, if you've seen that thing like on Google Earth or anything since,
I have not seen it.
You got to look it up. It's hardly recognizable, but those two big runways are still there. But yeah, so here I'm lumbering down the thing. I'm thinking, man, I should be getting an airborne soon. And just man, I can't get the nose wheel off the ground. Finally, lumber the thing into the air. It's just kind of whoop, and I go gear up, flaps up. Oh shit, They came on the radio and said, Sparky, check your flaps. It's just in the fog of war, with everything going on, everything I had to be thinking about. And then this alarm red, and I think it's the we had a couple Patriots launch. You go, oh man, and we had no freak. We're launching in the darkness. The radios were trashed. We got nobody to talk to. We got no tasking. I finally got the Marine desk up at Jubail on the radio, and so ended up just about the sun's just coming up over the horizon. There's some big white billowy clouds above us. And we're cruising up the coast of Kuwait. They're about 15 miles into this parking lot of like a Home Depot thing where there's 3 artillery batteries shelling that oil refinery at El Khafji, just over the border into Saudi Arabia. And I got and my first pass. I'm rolling in, I'm inverted, pulling down, about to roll out. And Sparky says, brake right, chaff flare. And I come off and kind of keep the airplane slicing down. And here's a big conical white smoke trail. SA-7 or 14 shot at me, and the thing ran out of gas about me across the street, and it was an SA-14 because my flares were not defeating that. I mean, it was in the same place in my canopy as I'm going through the sky, and I just remember this will tie into kind of our discussion about planning. I just remember thinking, I cleaned up my shorts, of course, climbed, and that was a close one, and I tried to stand off and lock some Mavericks out of these artillery tubes, and we weren't getting any good lock. And I remember, you'll remember this, I know you will, but it was a couple nights before the war started, before the ATO came in. President Bush had already addressed the nation, and General Glosson came around.
Buster?
Remember, we're in that,
Yep.
Yeah, we're in that big bubble hangar. He walks in with his 3 stars, and every colonel in the world, you and the squadron commanders, and we're just pilots only in there. You got SPs with M16s at the door, and you could hear a pin drop when he got up on an interchanging stand and told us, gentlemen, you're about to be part of the largest use of air power in the history of air power. And here we go. But remember, we went on to tell us that we're all he's got, and that we're good and we're trained and our flight leads know what to do, and our maintenance is awesome, and our jets are great, and our munitions are awesome, and our weapons are great. But you got the 3rd largest army in the world, and they're dug in the desert up there, and they're waiting for us. But we're not going to just mosey up there and see what's up. We're going with everything we got from day one. And that the miracle was that the army counterparts and General Schwarzkopf had just said, we're going to soften them up with air power for a little bit, and so it was just an awesome plan, and he empowered us to go up there and make good decisions. We're not going to tell you. I think he told the story about being in Vietnam and being told what altitude and heading to fly at, and getting their asses shot off, and he said, this is going to be different. because you guys know what to do. Go up there and make good decisions, or make decisions on the spot, but make good decisions. Because if the weather's not as briefed, or the threat's not as briefed, or things aren't working out, bring it on home. We'll come up with a better plan because I need you for day 2 and day 20 and day whatever. There's no replacements. There's no 100 missions and go home. I got you guys and I got your jets, and I need you to 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 bring it back and this keep
Yeah.
taking it to them.
Yeah.
And so I remembered. I know Ken remembered that that speech when I'm just things aren't working out on that first mission. I mean, it was hell in a handbasket from sitting in the revetments, with the APUs running, sitting alert, and I remember coming back home, and just when I got back into Saudi airspace and we hadn't dropped a thing, I almost got my ass handed to me by an SA-14, and I just remember thinking, holy shit, what have I got us into? Because I really felt like, a lot of the efforts that we made in terms of getting a training program together and getting plans together to get us over there, and in addition of obviously to what you talked about with maintenance and your leadership and General Anderson flying with us, I just felt like I was pretty instrumental in us getting there. And I had this really sinking sensation of what the hell have I gotten us into? I mean, we wanted to be there, It's like the Super Bowl. You don't want a war to happen, but if there's going to be one, you want to be in on it, right? And
Yeah.
there we were, and my first mission just was not going as planned. And I thought, man, how do I make myself come and do this again? And you knew you would, and I did 2 more times that day. But in fact, when I landed, CNN was on the ramp with cameras. My parents actually saw me on TV. And I did get a comment after I did Mover's interview. Some guy says, I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I remember seeing Shanghai on CNN because I get out of the jet. They had to tow me back because I didn't have nose wheel steering. And I get out by that bubble hangar, and we end up going back a little bit later with the sun higher and knowing where the target was, and blew it off the face of Earth. But I remember that being asked by this reporter or something, and I guess this guy said, I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I remember Shanghai saying, I just thank God that I'm an American pilot today. And I thought, well, that was a pretty good quote for a guy that was scared shitless just 10 minutes ago and landed with all the shit hanging on the airplane, like a hero or whatever. But it was an awesome thing. But so give us a little more of your perspective on it, boss. Like, I know you didn't, probably fly as much as you wanted to, but we did so many different things. We adapted so quickly to so many different missions that probably nobody ever anticipated us doing. What was your perspective as far as adapting to all that, all those battle staff directives that came down, and just the fluidity of the thing?
Yeah. I mean, hell, it all started off with we were supposed to be in 2 trailers for our squadron up by the old wing building or whatever at the other end of the flight line. And I kept telling Sandy Sharp, I said, we're all set up down here in this building down on the flight line, to move us now, we'd have to go back and, start from scratch and all that. And it would just be so disruptive. He said, yeah, you're right. Well, just about that time was when the F-16 Lantern birds from Moody came in, and because they needed to get closer to the border because of, everything they were hauling without, needing tankers as soon as they got airborne. So they ended up taking those 2 trailers as their squadron building, which were originally supposed to be ours. But I was so damn glad that we were down there where we were at, because when the Cajuns came in, we basically, merged our intel shops, and it just, the synergism really was fantastic. And, and I mean, we ended up having to send guys to KKMC. Colonel Radcliffe ended up going up there to run that operation because he wasn't supposed to be down there more than about a week to 2 weeks. And he basically stayed the whole time running the operations at KKMC. We had guys up there, in the RSU. We had guys that working on the ramp. Then, of course, Al Juf, when the scud hunting started, we ended up sending people out to Al Juf and, doing the mission out there. And when they were doing uh, I don't think we didn't, but the guys from Myrtle Beach, I think, did flying night missions.
Yeah, they had one squadron. That's all they did. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all they did was fly nights with, the Maverick, and basically, using a soda straw to
Poor
try
man's
and find
FLIR.
targets. And, they did a damn fine job. So,
Oh, yeah.
Everybody down there, from my perspective, looking back over the years, everybody did one hell of a good job. Not just our squadron, but everybody did, adapting. As the war progressed, and as soon as the ground war started, everything was taken off the table as far as, the altitude restrictions that we were given about on day 2 or day 3, when they told us, you can't go below 10,000 feet, because we don't need you to get shot up and start losing airplanes. But we adapted, and it's just like flying the 3 sorties, trip turning for those first 4 or 5 days. And, we said, okay, this isn't working. We got to change that. And boom.
It really brings up an interesting point too, that the difference between peacetime and combat, right? That because how many times did we do surges, do ORIs or whatever? We'd fly 3 sorties, no problem at all, right? To the range and back and whatever. But we realized that in combat, with the distances that we had, the stress that you're under, you just didn't. Could you do it? Sure. Could we have sustained it? Of course. But was it smart? No. Was there a better way to do it? Yes. And you found what that way was, and that's what we quickly adapted to. And it didn't make it a gentlemanly war, but it sure made it I think a safer opportunity for us to do our very best. But you talk about maintenance too, and I know this. The in-service rates of our aircraft in combat were better than they were in peacetime, in ORIs or exercises. 97.5%.
It's always that way. I don't care what airplane you're flying. It's always that way. Yeah. Airplanes don't like to sit. They like to fly. Yeah. And so whether you're flying an F4, F-A-10, F-16, you name it, when they're turning and burning, and the maintenance guys are doing their thing, and they're all into it. The MC rates just keep going up.
Yeah. And then, it's just, but in the maintainers, and you've mentioned them, but the work that they put in, and the weapons troops, just to get all that stuff. I mean, just unbelievable effort that's sustained we flew, I think, over 8,500 missions in 42 days with 144 airplanes. We lost 6 airplanes. We lost 2 guys. We had 4 POWs, and losing guys and losing airplanes is horrible, obviously. But contrast that to Vietnam and what the loss rates were. Yeah. If anybody said we're going to take, and of course the A-10s were significant part of the effort, but take that and extrapolate it along the entire coalition. And if anybody said, we're going to go to the desert and we're going to fight against the 3rd largest army in the world who's been dug in for 6 months, and we're going to take 144 A-10s, and we're going to have 0.00001 loss rate, it would have sent you to the loony bin. There's no way that's going to ever happen. And it did. Yeah. It'll never happen, probably never happen again. Largest use of air power in the history of air power. And, tremendous coalition, tremendous leadership, tremendous guys, tremendous maintainers. Everybody was part of that awesome victory, and we did it. And we went home, didn't we? Brought them all home.
Yeah. Brought them all home. I mean, I'll never forget laying in my tent on the bed the night that James Baker was supposedly meeting Tariq Aziz for the big powwow, and that was going to be the determining factor as to whether or not we were going to head to war. And I'll never forget when the meeting was supposedly over and the announcements came out that, the Iraqis didn't agree to anything. And Baker comes on and says, it doesn't look good at all. And it wasn't more than a day or so later when Buster Glosson came down to give us his big speech. And, And
Yeah.
then the rest is history.
Yeah, I remember. I remember shortly after that Buster Glosson speech, you rounded us all up. I've got a photo of this actually. It's a photo, and I think I'm not sure you're in the photo, but you're up front talking to us, and we're just sitting in those chairs lined up in that warehouse building. I'm kind of sitting near the back because you and I had already kind of been over a lot of this, and the ATO was coming in, and um, and you were giving us the speech after the speech. Uh, you gave us a it was a real appropriate um, you know
Get your
uh,
things right and get your minds
yeah
right. And
yeah it was I was trying to find the right word. It wasn't somber, but it was the General Glosson speech was invigorating. We were just we were ready to go. um, let's just do this thing and get it over with. And he just gave us that kind of rah rah at first, and then just he empowered us to go do it right, and we knew we weren't going to repeat the failed mistakes at such high cost from Vietnam. And then you gave us that got to do it right, get yourselves right, get your heads right, get your maps ready. We're going to go. This thing's happening. And then, I don't know if you stuck around for this. You probably had some other duties, but I remember Growth Wilson gathering a bunch of us together and on a chalkboard showing us what AAA looks like.
yep,
23
yep,
millimeter looks like popcorn.
yep,
57 millimeter is a big white cloud with a dark center. He says drawing pictures with chalk out of chalkboards. And you guys know how high it goes, and what the blast rate, the frag pattern is, but you know what it looks like when you're getting shot at. And because there's another thing is we had maybe 4 or 5 or 6, half a dozen guys that had ever seen combat. Growth was I think an '01 FAC in the latter days of Vietnam. Maybe
yeah,
the wing commanders had
yeah. Sandy Sharp for sure
F-100
was.
guy or something. Yeah, I think he might have been a Misty FAC in F-100s with with Bud Jackson, I think. But anyway, yeah. So, but very few people had any combat experience, and so it was just interesting the progression of those little briefings, and then you go eat your steak and eggs and go get your
Yeah,
briefing and go
yeah,
go for it.
yeah,
And that's one thing I want to say about you too, sir, is that um, you were a strong leader. You are a strong leader, but you led by example, and you're a servant leader. And I imagine you did your fair share of admonishing guys if they needed it, but there wasn't much of that needed around our group, and and I just felt like you and then Yankee, and when Yankee took over the squadron, he just followed in your footsteps super well, and Pepsi is his second in command. In fact, Pepsi was on that flight with me to the boneyard. So there's a picture of me swigging some champagne, me and Pepsi with our jets parked at that boneyard ramp.
yeah.
So yeah, that was a
Well, you
good.
mentioned it early on too, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it myself. That while we're over there, doing our thing, Pat and Martha and Wayne's wife, they were back holding the show together back home,
Yeah.
and it started out kind of rocky because there were a lot of them that were trying to find any excuse they could to, you got to get so and so back home, because I can't pay the bill. I don't know how to pay the
Yeah.
the VAT taxes, and yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, yeah, I was going to
they
mention
held
that too.
together, and they did a great job keeping the wives together. And then they started partying together at the O Club, and I mean they finally got like
Yeah.
this, and
Yeah.
nobody was going to beat them after that.
I was going to mention that. I started to talk about it earlier and got sidetracked as I want to do. But is that not only has Pat been long suffering in your career, but she was an awesome squadron commander's wife. I mean, as the first lady of the Vultures, Pat was Pat was everything. I mean, and it's you don't have to guess it why the wives have had I think they had the first reunion, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, and my former wife went to that reunion as well, and they all talk so fondly of Pat and how she brought those ladies together. You can imagine being clustered around some little TV in somebody's base house and watching Bernard Shaw from the roof of the Al Rashid Hotel live
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
CNN, and thinking that your guys are going into harm's way in the first televised war. You know, that'd be really really scary. And you're in England. You're somewhat, you're certainly geographically removed from your family and your longtime friends, and you've got those other squadron wives and significant others to rely upon, and they did. They were just super tight knit group. In fact, I've told the story on Movers Channel. It happened to be a Friday night back in England at the club when I returned. Remember, I shot that helicopter when I was out at Al Juf, and made my way back to FOD, and that's when Steve Phillips,
Yeah.
I think it was Rob Sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, Rob Sweet got shot down, and Steve set up the rest cap, and then Steve got shot down and didn't make it out. And Rob just retired recently as the last POW on active duty, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
guy.
Steve was a good friend of mine. I knew him when I was over in my NATO
That's cool.
staff job at 2
Okay.
ATAF, and he was down at the Warrior Prep Center at Ramstein.
Yeah, one of our most experienced guys and great guy. And so the same day I shot the helicopter down is the same day that those guys went down. And so it was a little bit somber back at FOD, but we had our few minutes of celebration over my air-to-air kill. But it was Friday night back at the club at Alconbury, and Colonel Headland pulled Angela out of the club to say, "Hey, something exciting happened. Todd's all right." But she went in and rang the bell and bought the bar like shit hot, right? So you talk about the wives doing it right. They did. They knew what to do, and we would be remiss if we didn't say the Vultures knew how to play some crud too, didn't we, sir?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the wives did too.
Should I mention Bahrain? we'll leave Bahrain between me and you and the other guys that were on that brief deployment.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Ugly. Ugly.
I won't say anything about it except I do kind of recall us being escorted back to the causeway and maybe asked not to return to the country of Bahrain. But the Navy Club there has never been the same after the Vultures spent a couple hours in Bahrain. That's all we'll say about that.
Yeah.
So good. Hey, I'm gonna have you on again, sir, because we've just scratched the surface really, and man, it's been a treat for me. We've got an hour and 22 minutes. It seemed like 15 minutes, and
Wow.
yeah. Well,
I could have done this all night, Todd. Be honest with
yeah,
you. This is
me
fun.
too. You already knew I was long-winded, but hey, for the folks that have been watching, I appreciate you in the chat. I'm going to put one more up here. It's going to be Colin O'Connor in good company with this guy. Thank you, Mover. Appreciate you, man. I tell you, Mover's been the best friend and support to me as I've kind of launched this endeavor and taught me a lot. And
yeah, Colin follows Mover as well.
Yeah, Colin and me and about 400,000 other people. Yeah, Mover's the real deal, man, and real fighter pilot. He was, he flew F-16, but whatever. But you know what? It's interesting too. Colin will tell you this. Watching Mover's channel, he often asks another podcast do this too. Is like, what airplane could you have flown if you of any airplane? And a lot of these guys say the A-10. Guys that haven't flown the A-10 say, man, I wouldn't mind flying that A-10. It's kind of sad to see him go. I think next time I have you on, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit too. But so I'll ask you, sir. So of your airplanes, you've flown the F-4, all the models. It sounds like they're a couple versions of the F-16. Done some high speed missions like Lantern and those things in Korea. Flew the A-10, of course, in combat. So what's your favorite jet?
Well, mission wise, it was the A-10. I mean, it was a man's airplane, bell cranks and pulleys when things didn't work right, but it was a fun airplane to fly. I really enjoyed my short time in the A-10, and the F-4, I flew it the longest, and that was my first love and always will be. But I really enjoyed the A-10 for the mission that we had, and it was just one hell of a good time, whether we were back in England or at the FOL in Germany or at King Fahd, Saudi Arabia, during the war. It was just a fun airplane. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and until tonight, I would have never known that you were, a newer guy than I was in the A10. I mean, we showed up. I think I showed up not too long after you, really, probably, and I had no idea that you hadn't been an old hand A10 guy because
No, I'd never flown the airplane before. I came straight from my NATO job. I was probably at Alconbury 4 or 5 days, and then I ended up going back TDY to DM to get checked out, do the short course. And in fact, that's where I ran into my old buddy Steve Ladd as well. He was back there doing his short course checkout just before I was, ready to graduate. And,
I've talked to Smokey a little bit through my affiliation with Mover, actually, and he's still over there loving the life over there. In Europe. So good, another great man. So well, sir, hey, thank you so much for being my inaugural guest. It's been just an honor for me to get to see again. It's been 31 years or so, and it doesn't feel like it's been 3 months even since I've seen you before.
Yeah,
so,
well, we had a great time, Todd, and this has been a hoot for me. I really enjoyed this tonight. This is a lot of fun, and anytime you want me back, just let me know.
Well, I'm going to hold you to that, and tell Pat to keep that guest room warm for me. I'll be down there, sometime in the spring, I imagine. So
no problem whatsoever.
Maybe over the holidays. Great. Thanks again, sir. Appreciate it.
You bet, Todd. See you, bud.
Hey, and so I'm going to sign off to everybody that's been out there watching as well. And thank you for joining me this first time. I'll put some more content up on the channel. Just new at this and learning, but we're planning to do it every Wednesday, Warthog Wednesdays at 8:10 Central Standard Time on the YouTube channel, Two Bags Full Shanghai. Thanks again. See ya.